As we begin this fifth lecture in our church history series, we're talking more about this period that we've called the Christian Empire period. Of course, we started talking about the Apostolic Church. That's the church of the New Testament, of the book of Acts, and a little bit beyond, because, of course, New Testament history extends a little bit beyond the book of Acts. Then we talked about the early church period from the time of approximately the death of the last apostle, which we believe to be the Apostle John, until the conversion of Constantine, because things changed pretty radically for the church in the whole social environment and how the church connected to the culture and to the social environment with the conversion of Constantine and the eventual making of Christianity a favored religion within the Roman Empire, which Constantine did not do officially. You could very well make the argument that he did it unofficially, yet nevertheless his successors certainly did it officially. And so as we considered some themes in our last lecture, we considered that first Christianity became officially allowed, then officially supported by the Roman Empire. Secondly, we spoke about the phenomenon of Christianity sort of retreating to the monastery, and how the monastic movement was both good and bad, but it was also useful for the church. And we talked about some of the good points of the monastic movement and some of the bad points of the monastic movement. Thirdly, in our series just sort of looking at general trends and characteristics of the Christian Empire period, we want to look at the emergence of the Roman Catholic Church and the institution of the Papacy. It's really amazing, isn't it? You go to Rome and you visit the Vatican City, and you see what an amazing splendor there is in the papacy. I mean, you walk through St. Peter's Basilica, and it's absolutely stunning. I tell you my own personal feelings in going through the Vatican and going through St. Peter's Basilica. I went through it, and I was absolutely impressed by the glory of man. I mean, to me it seemed like a supreme monument to the glory and the artistic ability and the ingenuity of man to make such a place. I can't say I really felt much of anything about God there at all. But it certainly was an amazing testimony to the splendor, to the ingenuity, to the glory of man. Now, when you consider and sort of look at this, how did the church get from this persecuted group, sometimes on the edge of destruction in the early church period, to the amazing splendor and power and political authority demonstrated by the papacy and the Roman Catholic Church through church history, and then in some ways even to today? You say, how did it get from point A to point B? How did it make that journey? Well, we sort of want to consider that right now. First of all, we would have to consider in our minds this whole phenomenon that we spoke of in a previous lecture about the patriarchal cities of the early church period. Do you remember that when we spoke about that? How there were 4 patriarchal cities, and actually, nobody sat down on a piece of paper with a map and said, well, let's make 4 patriarchal cities. These developed in a very natural way to prominence, right? We can understand why Jerusalem was prominent among other cities. We understood why Antioch was prominent, being sort of the home church and the home city of Paul. We understood why Alexandria was prominent, because it being a major intellectual center. And then, of course, well, Rome was Rome. Of course it would be prominent. And so these 4 patriarchal cities developed an authority over the rest of Christianity, and they rose to this prominence. Now, it's interesting to see how the bishop or the patriarch of Rome emerged as the leading figure of the church, at least in the West. You see, this is what you have to understand about the Pope. Do you understand what the Pope's most fundamental title is? His most fundamental title is, he's the Bishop of Rome. That's it. But it's the fact that he's the Bishop of Rome in Roman Catholic theology and thinking that gives him this authority over all of Christianity, that gives him the keys to the kingdom, as they envision Peter receiving the keys to the kingdom. But remember that his fundamental title is, he's just a bishop, just as the bishop of Spital, as we mentioned before, sort of comically, the bishop of this city, the bishop of that city. But the fact of the matter is in the political environment of the Christian Empire period, and actually leading up to it before, if I could put it sort of in a slang kind of term, the Bishop of Rome had juice. He had authority, he had power, and he tried to exercise it. Now, at a time, the idea was that the Bishop of Rome was equal in authority and power in sort of a rough kind of arrangement between these other patriarchal cities, Alexandria, Jerusalem, and Antioch. But over time, the Bishop of Rome was successfully able to exert his prominence over those other places. For example, Pope Innocent I, this is in the year 402, he ruled that no important decision could be made in the church, or at least by the churches in the West, without the knowledge and the approval of the Bishop of Rome. I should really go back to our map just for one moment and ask you to consider something about the way that this is arranged. Okay, if you take a look at our map here and notice, geographically, you certainly have an arrangement, right? All these three patriarchal cities are sort of grouped together in the east, and there's only one patriarchal city in the west. So there's really no doubt which one would sort of have a natural prominence among all the Western churches. And by the way, we can say that the area of most successful expansion of Christianity was both west in the Roman Empire and north. It certainly did expand to the east and to the south somewhat, but by far its most successful expansion was all this way. So Rome became the center of something that very naturally gave it more authority over all of Christendom than these three cities, Alexandria, Jerusalem, and Antioch, much more in the east. In any regard, Pope Innocent, in the year 402, made this declaration that no important decision could be made by churches in the West without the knowledge and the approval of the Bishop of Rome. Now, obviously, that's just sort of a very, I don't know if you want to say naked power play, right? He's saying everything has to go through me, everything has to go through Rome. Now, following him, another pope named Pope Zosimus said no one can question a decision of the Bishop of Rome. And so that's another step in establishing the authority. First, everything has to go through me, and then second, his successor said nobody can question our decisions. And then later, in the year 590, Pope Gregory the Great had a huge political, religious, and cultural influence. Now, this is what I want you to notice here. Pope Innocent II, 402, that's really before the total collapse of the Roman Empire. It's certainly teetering at this time, but the Roman Empire is still existing. It's even before the sack of Rome in, 410, I believe. Then Zosimus following him, again, we're still talking about there still being a Roman Empire, even though it's tottering even more. But by the time you get to Pope Gregory the Great, what year is that? That's 590, right? The Roman Empire is gone, gone, gone. And that whole administrative and organizational infrastructure has disappeared from the face of the earth regarding the Roman Empire. But what institution is there on the earth that has the sort of administrative and organizational structure? Well, it's the church. And so in a lot of ways, we can see that the popes stepped into the vacuum created by the fall of the Roman Empire. Gregory I, also known as Gregory the Great, he not only led spiritually, but also politically. He organized the defense of Rome against attacking enemies. He also appointed bishops for other cities as his deputies and representatives, and he gave them a special robe to show themselves as his associates. Gregory also influenced the church music so much that almost all the church music of the Middle Ages is called what? Gregorian. It's after Pope Gregory I. Gregory had an important role in popularizing and legitimizing the teachings of, for example, the worship of the saints, purgatory, and the celebration of masses for the dead in purgatory. I don't know if you understand the idea of purgatory or not. If you don't, hold on. We're going to explain it very well when we get up to the period of the Reformation. And so Gregory was a hugely influential character at this time when the West was feeling the absence of the Roman Empire. It's as if Gregory, who seemed to be a brilliant and capable man, and a spiritual man as well, but he seemed to step into the void, this vacuum that was left by the disappeared Roman Empire. There's sort of a well-known